Sana Iltija is Mehbooba Mufti's daughter. Now, you remember that she has spoken to the press a couple of times in the past. She talked about the fact that she was distressed with her mother's situation. She approached the Supreme Court after writing to various levels of government asking for permission to see her mother, who is currently being detained, now day 45, in Kashmir. After the Supreme Court granted Iltija the permission to fly to Srinagar and see her mother, she has visited her mother and now returned to Chennai, from where she speaks to us. This is her first conversation with the media since then. Iltija, good evening and thank you for speaking with us. If I may call you by your first name, I want to first ask you how, if you've seen your mother lately, how is she doing? Is she okay health-wise? What can you tell us about her situation right now?
Well, it's been 45 days since this crippling curfew was imposed, and she's been in solitary confinement since the 5th. So, I mean, her spirits are high and she's as fine as anybody would be, somebody who's been placed in solitary confinement. So, I would say she's doing okay and she's fine health-wise, and mentally, she's a strong person. So, she's doing all right.
You use the word solitary, the phrase solitary confinement twice. We understand from the government and from statements that have been made to the Supreme Court that family members have been allowed to see her. Why do you believe she's being isolated, or what do you mean by solitary confinement?
Solitary confinement obviously means, the whole purpose of keeping her away from family is to weaken her resolve. It's to completely isolate her from the rest of the world, because other Kashmiris have whatever restricted access to the television. I mean, our newspapers anyways are down. The government of India claims that newspapers are still being printed, but it's a bit of a joke because the first page only has Article 370 benefits, ads, and you don't have any proper columns discussing the situation. So she's been isolated so that, they are trying to weaken her spirit, and they're obviously trying to force her in some way to accept whatever has happened, and because of this she's been kept in solitary confinement. Otherwise, I don't understand what the need was. You don't have internet in any household in Kashmir right now. Very few landlines are working. Incoming calls on these landlines mostly are not working. So they've obviously taken her because they want to break her spirit like any other mainstream leader right now who's been kept in solitary confinement.
Well, you've also, and I just want to ask you a couple of things about your case in Supreme Court. While that case was being argued, the Attorney General said that you could have gone to the district magistrate and asked permission to see your mother. You needn't have actually approached the court. Your lawyer argued that you were restricted from leaving your home until the 22nd of August. Could you have gone to the district magistrate and just asked for permission to see your mother?
I could have gone to the district magistrate if I could teleport myself, or if there was a hyperloop or an underground tunnel from Gupkar, where I live, to where the district magistrate stays. I mean, I don't understand why they want to constantly put themselves on the spot and keep, I don't want to embarrass them. Faye, I was placed under detention, and especially after my interviews went out, I was told by SSG at the gate that now you are in the same category, detention category, as your mother. We cannot allow you to receive visitors. You are not allowed to meet anybody, and we'll not allow you to leave to the house. And I must add here that it was only after my very public open letter to the Home Minister, Shri Amit Shah, once that went public, I think these people felt a little embarrassed, and that's when I was allowed to leave the city. But how did they expect me to have any kind of communication with the district magistrate when we were confined? My house was turned into a jail. I've shared pictures with news channels of how padlocks were put on the inner gates of my house, and we weren't even allowed to step out of the gate. So I could have only contacted the district magistrate if I had a hyperloop, or if I could teleport myself, or if we had some sort of mental telepathy. Otherwise, there was no way to communicate him. I don't know why they feel the need to lie so much.
You've also spoken up in the past about the fact that you were threatened with arrest yourself. Is that something you still fear?
I mean, you know, my mother is the person I love the most in the world, and she's been taken from me, so I have nothing to lose. I mean, what they can do now is what they're doing to everybody in Kashmir. Every Kashmiri right now is being intimidated. He's being harassed, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a member of the civil society, whether it's the journalists, local Kashmiri journalists themselves. And obviously, even I have received indirect threats that if I speak up now, especially, it's a move. If I choose to speak to the press, also that move will be fraught with consequences. And you know how Farooq Saab, you know, who's so old and he's not been keeping well, how he was slapped with PSA, and how it's been done in such an arbitrary manner without any sort of rhyme or reason. So I've also indirectly received threats that if I do something, if I choose to speak to the media, then, you know, something similar could be done to my mother. That's being used as, I would say, as a they're trying to blackmail me because my mother is in their custody. And I also want to add that I've indirectly been told that if I access any of her social media accounts, my mother has a Facebook page and she also has a Twitter page, Twitter account, which she used to be very active on. I've been told that if I use any of these handles on her behalf, I'll be booked on charges of impersonation, which, if you ask me, is ridiculous. Because if my mother authorizes me to use her Twitter account, I don't see what the problem should be. The fact of the matter is that they don't want any voice from Kashmir to be heard, whether it's Mehbooba Mufti's daughter, whether it's a local journalist. They want to muzzle all voices and make sure that it's only their narrative and their propaganda that plays out nationally and internationally both.
So, if I heard you correctly, you're telling me that you're speaking to us tonight at some personal risk. Is that correct?
Of course I am. Of course I am, Faye. I mean, speak to any Kashmiri right now. How many Kashmiri voices have you heard? Someone like Shaila speaks, and look at the kind of abuses, the barrage of abuses that poor girl gets. For what? I mean, we're speaking up for Kashmiris. Is that a crime? And yes, obviously, I'm doing this at a personal risk because it's not just about me, it's about my mother as well. My mother is in their custody. But, you know, someone has to stand up, someone has to speak up. I cannot let them bully and intimidate or harass me, and I am not going to tolerate it, and I am going to keep speaking up as a responsible citizen. I am going to let everybody know how Kashmiris are being subjugated and humiliated and oppressed.
Well, you did say, of course, that you believe that if your mother gives you permission to put out a message on her behalf on her social media handles, that would be your right to do so. Is there a message that your mother wants to put out on social media, or has she asked you to put out or convey a message on her behalf?
Well, first of all, my mother has authorized me to use her Twitter account, and that's not even a crime. Like Chidambaram Saab, he's been in jail, I think, for what, the past 10 days, and he's told his family to tweet on his behalf. It's another matter that I haven't started as of now. But yes, when I met my mother, she was extremely disturbed and extremely distressed to know that minor children, boys as young as the age of 12 and 13 and their teenage years are being taken by police and by paramilitary forces. And she's obviously heard horror stories of how they're being tortured and how they're being abused. And these are blood-curdling stories. You hear about how they're being given, they're being electrocuted, they're being given electric shocks, and sometimes when they pass out, then they're given electric shocks in their private parts. These reports have emerged. They're made to, they're stripped, and then they're being made to place in sort of a human mountain where they're placed naked, one on top of the other. These are techniques that were used in Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. Why is our country doing this to small children? I mean, are we even a democracy anymore?
Well, Iltija, you said yourself right now that there's a complete communication clampdown, and from what a lot of the journalists, the senior journalists who've traveled to Kashmir have told us, is that most of what they're hearing are rumors, because in the absence of formal communication, there will be a lot of rumors. So all of the things you just called out, it's also very possible that these are rumors that are flying about because there is an absence of normal communication. Is there any proof at all for these accusations?
Faye, I don't know if you're familiar with the news items that have been taken out by BBC, NTRT, and various international media agencies. They have pictures. They have substantiated all these stories with evidence, with pictures, with pictures of young boys as old as 14, and you can see them. They have these lesions, they have these injury marks, and this is not something they're going to inflict on themselves, right? So there's proper evidence. Why isn't the government coming clean with a list of detainees? I mean, if you ask them in all these strange press conferences that they hold, they refuse to reveal the number of people and especially the number of minors that have been detained. And you just asked me if my mother had a message for everybody else. My mother was very distressed to know about these children being taken away from their mothers. And I have, today I wrote an email which was addressed to the Home Secretary and also the Chief Secretary of Jammu and Kashmir, and I've told them that I'm writing on behalf of my mother, who's a former Chief Minister, and she's the president of a regional party in Jammu and Kashmir, and she would like information on, she would like them to throw information on certain points, like how many people have been detained and how many of these are minors, how many of them have been shifted to Agra or any state outside Kashmir, how many people have been slapped with PSA. So this is information that we all deserve to know, right? Like, these can't just be rumors, Faye. I mean, just the fact that the government is not coming out clean raises sort of like suspicions and so many red flags. I mean, we deserve answers. It's been 45 days since this inhuman curfew has been imposed, and even today we have no clarity on these detentions that are being carried out.
So, if I understand correctly, your mother has authorized you to file what is effectively an RTI application on her behalf to find out how many people are being detained in the valley at this point, how many of them are minors, and and where they're being held. Is that correct?
Well, it's not an RTI, but I have sent an email to the Home Secretary and the J&K Chief Secretary. And I just sent it today sometime in the afternoon, and it basically asks questions like how many people have been detained, how many of them are minors, why are people being slapped with PSA. You know, the entire media knows how Farooq Saab was slapped with PSA. I mean, that's ridiculous. A former BJP MP, Swami Chinmayanand, has been accused of rape, and he's out and about, and the girl today even issued statements saying that what are the authorities waiting for? Are they waiting for me to commit suicide? You don't want to deal with that. That man is out because he's from BJP. You don't see that he could possibly be a rapist, but you've slapped PSA on a former chief minister, on an active member of parliament who happens to be really old, and he's not exactly in the best of health. So why these double standards? Why are you oppressing Kashmiris in this manner? I don't understand.
Well, I also want to ask you some more questions about your experience in Srinagar, if I may. You did say, of course, that you traveled to Srinagar to visit your mother. You're now back in Chennai. Did you visit other parts of the city or other parts of the state? Could you tell us the conversations that you've had or what you saw when you were there?
So I was allowed to move out a few times that I asked them, and I happened to visit my aunt, and the kind of stories I heard were very distressing. I heard about how even in, uptown areas like Rajbagh and Bhagat and Barzulla, you have boys as young as, 10, 12 coming out on the streets and protesting. And, there is a kind of peace, but it's a very abnormal, sullen and imposed sense of peace. And it feels like a volcano is just ready to erupt. It's a dormant volcano, and I think that's the reason why the government is so scared to lift the the telecommunications ban, because they know once it's lifted, all kinds of stories are going to come out. There's going to be an avalanche of pictures, of videos that people will want to share between each other. So even they know that the situation is not normal. I mean, it's been 45 days. I don't believe we're still having this debate if things are normal or not. I mean, we live in a country where the youth gets so impatient if their Swiggy order doesn't come on time. And here you have an entire state, 8 million people are incarcerated. Kashmir has been turned into an open air prison, and there's not so much as like even a protest or questions that are being asked. It's very disappointing.
Well, also understand, or we're being told that people in hospitals are having trouble accessing medication, or people who run normal businesses have not been able to go to work. Could you tell us some of the conversations that you have had with, with the people in Kashmir, the ones who need to simply send their children to school or go to work every day?
I mean, I know that when I went and saw my aunt, she said that, she has neighbors and they complain about how they're not even able to wire money to their kids because obviously banking services have been affected because the internet is down. So there's students, Kashmiri students all over the country who pretty much are living, hand to mouth right now because their parents haven't been able to wire money. I read an article on Scroll which spoke about how they haven't even been able to pay rent money to their landlords, and now they don't even have money for their meals, Faye. I mean, what has happened to the collective conscience of this nation? Is it in slumber? What else needs to happen to Kashmir for you people to speak up? What will it take? What will it take for you people to speak up? Why are you punishing Kashmiris? Are they subhuman? Do they not deserve your attention? You keep talking about how you've integrated the people of this, Kashmir into the rest of the country. You've only integrated land. You clearly don't seem to care about the people. Your behavior has been so callous. It's been so insensitive. And after 45 days, again, we are debating if things are normal. How can there be any semblance of normalcy in a state where everything has been cut, where everything is shut?
Iltija, let me ask you this now. There is the argument that several successive governments, two of which were run by your family members, tried various things but were unable to bring peace to the valley, were unable to solve the problems of the valley. And here is a government that has made a decision that they believe will bring peace, they believe will solve the problems of the valley. Is that not something you agree with?
Well, first of all, I'd like to correct you there, Faye. My grandfather was the chief minister from 2002 to 2005. And those years were probably the best years that Kashmir has seen in the past, 2 decades. It was largely peaceful, and the irony is that you had Vajpayee ji at the center who believed in Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat and Kashmiriyat. So this whole logic that governments have tried everything, तो इसका मतलब क्या है? आप बॉम्बे में शिवसेना के साथ है तो कल क्या शिवसेना की से सरकार नहीं चलेगी तो आप क्या बॉम्बे मुंबई को भी फिर आप यूनियन टेरिटरी कर देंगे? ये क्या लॉजिक है कि आप जबरदस्ती जज जूरी एग्जीक्यूशन? हाउ कैन यू टेक द लॉ इन योर हैंड्स, फे? जस्ट बिकॉज दे हैव अ ब्रूट majority doesn't mean that they can reduce a state from a state into a union territory and then talk about peace. वहां कौन सा अमन है अभी? वहां कौन सी शांति है? आप मुझे खुद बताइए, इस डिसीजन से कौन सी अमन, कौन सी शांति आने वाली है? ये तो इनका अपना एजेंडा में था, इन्हें तभी किया है. किस तरीके से किया? द dubious manner it was done in. It's been imposed on the people of the state, and now you're justifying it with all kinds of reasons. How have they treated the people of Kashmir for almost 2 months now? They've shown absolutely no sensitivity. You've normalized violence in Kashmir ki abhi koi aapko aage death nahi dikh rahi to everything is normal. You've normalized, dehumanizing Kashmiris. Nobody in this country is speaking up for Kashmiris except people of Punjab, our Sikh brothers and sisters. They've spoken up. They are mobilizing people. I saw how even in Houston they're going to be organizing a rally next week. So apart from them, who else has stood up for us? Amongst the politicians, Captain Amrinder Saab, उनने आर्मी में सर्व किया, उनसे बड़ा नेशनलिस्ट तो इनमें भी बीजेपी में कोई नहीं हो सकता. Just look at how gracious he's been. He opened his doors, he opened his heart to Kashmiri students who found themselves all alone on Eid. I mean, there are people who've stood up for Kashmir, but what is happening to the collective conscience of this nation, Faye? I'm really concerned. It's very disconcerting.
Well, Iltija, let me also ask you this. You did say, of course, that you believe that this is a government that has suspended the fundamental rights of the Kashmiri people, but this is also a political party that your family's party got into an alliance with. Your mother decided to form a government with them, and there's several criticism that was the beginning of what you're seeing play out today. What's the response to that?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of my mother, Faye, and that's something I make clear on every platform that I'm given to express myself, that I'm not my mother's proxy, and I don't represent PDP or any other political party for that matter. I'm speaking as a Kashmiri, and I'm speaking as a Kashmiri and as a concerned daughter. But yes, as far as aligning with them was concerned, these are questions that you can direct at my mother, and once she's out, you can talk to her about it. But what is obviously evident is that this experiment of getting North Pole and South Pole together clearly didn't work. But I think my grandfather had a completely different idea. He had, worked with Vajpayee Saab. They had a great working relationship, and Vajpayee ji really extended the hand of friendship to the people of Kashmir. So we thought that they would be an extension of that, but they are nothing like that, unfortunately.
I also want to ask you this. You've made statements in the past that you feel that you're being watched or that you're being threatened. Is that, and you're now in Chennai, do you still feel like someone's watching you?
Of course they're watching me. I mean, my lines are being tapped. I know all of this. Landlines even in Kashmir are tapped, by the way. I saw a picture of an STD in Kashmir and it said that please don't discuss the current situation. I mean, we're hurtling towards a police state. They've imposed martial law in Jammu and Kashmir. It feels like, we're in North Korea. North Korea has a history, The entire country is starving and they'll put a picture of a woman with sunglasses perched on her head in the aisle of a supermarket picking out her groceries. But you know what the ground situation is. So, of course, everybody is under surveillance. It's not just me, but I would say there are very few voices left, Kashmiri voices that are still actively speaking. I think Shehla is one of them, and you can literally count them on your fingers. And obviously, I've been pretty vocal as well. So they have threatened me, and I've been told that if you speak to the media now, we'll teach you a lesson, and this is what we're going to do with your mother, and you might have to pay a price as well. You might be arrested. I might be booked on flimsy charges. Clearly, there's no sense of law here. It's complete lawlessness. So, but the choice for me is to either be scared or to speak up, and I choose speaking up. I choose speaking up for Kashmir. I choose speaking up as a daughter, and this is something that I'm not going to stop.
And you've been quite vocal, like you said, about what you've seen or what you've witnessed in Srinagar. We understand also that there are students across the country right now, some of whom have been in touch with you, who are struggling because they aren't able to receive money from their parents. They've missed an entire cycle of admissions. There are other problems. If you were to put out an appeal to the rest of the country to open their homes or their hearts to Kashmiri students, if you had a message right now on behalf of the youth of Kashmir, what would that message be?
Well, that message would be that this government is trying to condition you in a certain way. They control the media. They control, unfortunately, other institutions also have been discredited. And they're trying to condition you in a way that you end up, dehumanizing Kashmiris and think of them as potential terrorists or stone pelters. But, they have aspirations like you, They want to live their lives like you do, like you go to school, you go to college. Kashmiris are no different. There's so many students around the country who find themselves stranded, and they know that the rest of the country feels very hostile towards them. And this is one of the reasons why they haven't even been very vocal about it, and they're not coming out. So I can only appeal to the country, to the people of this country, to really open their hearts, not their minds, because your mind is being conditioned in a certain way. I would say, please open your hearts to these students. They need your help, reach out to them. And just, they are at a time when, they've been completely cut off from their parents. They have no idea what's going on in the state. So if you can help them, if you can open your hearts and homes to them, please do that, because they need you.
I also want to ask you this personally, as someone who's speaking out at this point. Were you or are you in favor of the removal of Article 370?
No, I'm not. I think Article 370 is the basis on which, the leadership of Jammu and Kashmir acceded to this country. And let me point it out that there are lots of other states as well. Nagaland just celebrated their own Independence Day, I think on 14th, and they have their own national flag, they have their own national anthem. So if Nagaland can have its own special identity and they have these special clauses that ensure that this special identity is protected, why do you have double standards for Kashmir? Why are you punishing them? I mean, you keep talking about the unfinished business of partition and how you'll teach Pakistan a lesson. Is this how you want to teach Pakistan a lesson? By subjugating Kashmiris, by punishing them? जब आपको कन्वीनियंट लगता है आप कहते हैं कि इंडिया पाकिस्तान का मसला is not a bilateral issue, it's an internal issue, and then you say that no, you can't release telecommunications, that's dependent on the behavior of Pakistan. Why can't you make up your mind? On one hand, you say Pakistan doesn't need to get into this, it's an internal matter, but you'll hold 9 million people hostage. You'll subject them to this crippling curfew that's ravaged any sense of normalcy. Why? Because you think Pakistan is going to create trouble, it's going to foment trouble. Is this the solution, Faye?
But tell me something. You said yourself in our conversation a little while ago that you believe that when the comms clampdown is lifted, that there will be protest. There will be a display of emotion. Isn't this a way of making sure people don't get hurt or there isn't violence in the state?
Say, I said that people are upset, and what's happening is that right now you're not giving them an outlet to even protest peacefully. The longer you delay this for, the more angry they're gonna get. If I lock you up in a room right now और मैं आपको वहाँ 1-1.5 महीने के लिए रखती हूँ, पहले तो आपका गुस्सा कम होगा ना? Then it'll keep increasing. You'll think, what is going on? मतलब they've been caged like animals. They have no voice. And let me tell you, people of Kashmir have exercised a lot of restraint, Faye. I mean, even to this day, there is a civil curfew. Journalists, embedded journalists can deny it as much as they want. They can go in their fancy helicopters that are being given by the government of India, but you cannot deny facts. People have called for a civil curfew. They want to protest against this move, and you cannot blame, you cannot take them of even that right to articulate how they feel, Faye.